substance of the bill. I'm going to have a few extra copies of it. I apologize for not giving it out advance. We just don't have it yet. But I'm going to put sign-up sheets out there. I'm going to have a special one for eSplosh, so if you want to sign up to those, you can. We're only letting bills that have not already been heard in subcommittee get signed up for. So House Bill 740 will not be having public comment. Thanks.
Bet you sign Bill. No, David's here, so y'all work together. You work with David. You okay? You okay?
Are they?
All right, will the meeting please come to order? Would everyone please take their seats? We appreciate you being here. Do I have any teachers? I know we had a lot of visitors from Cobb County today. Are any of them still here from the leadership of Cobb? They were going to come by, some of them. But anybody this is your first time to join one of our meetings, please stand up. Anybody this is your first time, we have you make a speech if you want to. All right. We appreciate you being here. This time I'd like to ask, give me your number. Representative Hill, if you'd please do our devotion. What's your number? 16. Thank you. All right. Don't do a devotion. Just give us a prayer. All right. All right.
Let us pray. Our dear kind Heavenly Father, as we come to you with humble hearts, thanking you, Lord, for the privilege we have to worship you. We thank you, Lord, for your wisdom and guidance. We pray that you would give us that wisdom and guidance that we stand in need of today. Heavenly Father, we ask that you bless this meeting, and again, that you would guide us in everything that we do, that we may be a help to our constituents, our community, our state, and our United States. We pray, God, you'd bless each and every one of those. And we ask this in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. All right, this time I would like to, we've had 3 bills and a potential of one more added to our committee since we met this week. So I'd like to ask Representative Casas, if he would, to please listen, chairs, because we have some bills to your committees, all right?
Very well, Mr. Chairman. New assignments, we have House Bill 852, sponsored by Representative Michael Smith. And this has been assigned to academic support. This is the Cantrell Subcommittee. What was that number again? 852. We also have House Bill 853. And this is sponsored by Representative Dempsey. This one is also in the Academic Support Subcommittee, the Cantrell Subcommittee. 853. And finally, H.R. 1017, House Resolution 1017, sponsored by Representative Corbett. And this will be assigned to the Academic Achievement Subcommittee, the Chandler Subcommittee. And that's it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much. All right, Representative Cantrell, you had a meeting yesterday, and I think you have a bill that we're recommending to move to the full committee today. Would you please comment on that?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. Thank you. HB 740, sponsored by Chairman Nix, was heard in subcommittee yesterday. It was supported by virtually everybody in the room. No one spoke in opposition to the bill, and it was recommended for a full vote in committee unanimously in favor.
All right, that will be heard today. Representative Cantrell, would you please, you had 3 other bills. Would you tell us what the posture of the 3 other bills are?
We recommended a full vote on 787.
Which will be heard next Thursday.
And the other 2 were hearing only, so we're still investigating those 2 bills to see what action we want to take.
Thank you so much. All right. Representative Chandler, is she here? She had to leave. She'll be back, and who is her vice chair? Stovall. She's gone also. So but we had a couple of bills there, and I think both of the bills were passed. Is that not correct? Yes. And we'll hear them next Thursday also. That's the one on cardiac arrest. That passed. And pardon? Representative Cantrell's bill, and that'll be heard next Thursday also. That passed also. That's the one on.
It passed with flying colors.
Hey, all right, yeah.
I think there was like a standing ovation.
Okay, good. And that's the one to the health education. Is that not correct, yeah?
Yes, sir.
Right, okay. And that'll be Thursday. So you know those are where we are, part of the agenda for Thursday. All right. Any other questions about what's happened so far? And we also had another bill yesterday, and that was heard by from Representative Hilton. Now, your bill on the that committee
787. That was the one I mentioned earlier.
About. That's going to be heard next Thursday. Right. All right. And that was it, I think. Now, correct? Okay. At this time, we're going to the agenda. First of all, I'd like to ask Scott Turner. Scott Turner in here, Representative Turner. Good. Come on forward. Glad to have you with. I told you we'd be gentle today in the House. All right. So. You have a bill, House Bill 759.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring before you House Bill 759, LC number 337223, that is a tweak to eligibility for the special needs scholarship. For those, I'm sure you are all aware of the special needs scholarship. It's an opportunity for students to go to an alternative school of the parents' choosing, so long as the school accepts the funds through state approval process, and they have to meet residency requirements as well as a special IEP set of conditions that would qualify on an IEP. We don't change any of the qualifications. We simply say that once you have established your eligibility for that scholarship, you maintain it, because one of the issues is that you have to be in a public school for 1 year before you become eligible. We have found that if a parent decides that they want to homeschool for a year, or if they want to go to a school that doesn't accept the special needs scholarship, that they would lose their eligibility after that first year. And in one specific instance, I know of a private school that later started accepting special needs scholarship funds, but is no longer eligible because they've been in that private school for a couple of years. So that's what HB 759 attempts to address. Just basically saying, once you've reached all of the eligibility requirements, you maintain that.
If there's a break in attendance, you still maintain your eligibility.
Right.
All right, do I have any questions? Any questions from the committee? Is there anyone, did anyone sign up to speak on that? I don't.
I see this.
Anyone
the sign-up
out there?
sheet, but I don't
you
see anybody that signed
anyone
up.
out there see it? Because this is the first hearing on that one. So anyone out there sign up to speak? No one. All right. I have 18. Yes, I recognize you.
Thank you,
I knew
Chairman.
you'd have a question. Come on, there.
Well, I just wanted to-
Good. It's a good question. Always a good question. All right.
Hey, Representative.
Go ahead.
How can I
Thank
help?
you for your bill.
Thank
okay, I
you.
just wanted to make sure that you just clear this one piece up. So, a student will have been in a public school
Yes,
at some point,
they have
and
to. Yes.
and is now the kid is in a private school,
Mhm.
and now that they're in a private school, they have an IEP, and now that qualifies them for the scholarship.
No, they would have to establish their eligibility through the current method, which would require them to spend a year in the public school system with an IEP that has one of those qualifying conditions, such as blindness, deafness,
Yes.
autism. Yes. So once they have established that, they could move on under current law. All we're saying is that once they have established that 1 year in public school, that they don't have to return to the public school system in order to do it later if they have a gap in attendance for whatever reason.
Okay, and that's the piece that I'm trying to get clear in my head.
Mm-hmm.
They've established it, but now they're in a
Say they go
Private
to
school.
a private school that does not.
that doesn't accept the scholarship.
Correct.
But now the school is eligible to accept the scholarship, and so now the child can receive.
Well, the way the law reads now, they'd have to go back to that public school, spend another full year to get that.
No, I got that. I just wanted to make
right.
sure I'm clear on
Yeah,
what
okay,
you're saying
good.
here.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Good. All right.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you for the question. Anyone else? Anyone else? All right, do I have a motion? I have a motion to pass. I have a second. All right. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. All opposed? Unanimous. That's good. All
Thank
right.
you,
It
Mr.
goes
Chairman.
to
Thank you, members of
be
the
in
committee.
rules and there, and you can go by tomorrow and fill out your paperwork Monday.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Good job. All right. Next, if you look at your agenda, I think you're up next. Let's see here. Representative Randy Nix, you're next. You have two pieces of legislation, I think, so if you'll come down. Ma'am. Well, I'm gonna give you, what he has, right now, we're hearing Randy Nix's 763, and the one that Representative Cantrell just recommended we hear today also that passed will be 740. We're gonna pass that one out, so just, right now, just where you won't be confused, we're just gonna let you have 763, and then I'll have my staff pass out the other one where we won't confuse anyone, all right?
Okay.
Oh, it's in the folders, so it's already there then, the bill's already there. Huh? It's not on the agenda, because that's what we just added. Representative Cantrell just added that bill to the calendar. Yeah, okay. All right? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll do you want me to do 763 first?
I'd like you to do 763 first.
Okay. 763 is a relatively small change. My local juvenile court judge, Michael Key, called me back last summer and said, look, we already have a protocol and a committee to look at school attendance. And he just asks that we simply add to that, and it's on line 15, student attendance and school climate. So that's all the bill does, is just said that that committee that is looking at the attendance, which is very important, but also has the ability to look at school climate and hopefully be able to improve that. My thought on it is this: the more people we have in the community that are aware of what's going on in the school, I think the better off we are. And these are people that are appointed to that commission, well, they're already on that commission, who can have a bearing on what's going on in our school system. And I think that's a good idea, and that's why I brought this.
Mr. Chairman, would you
legislation.
just explain a little bit to the committee, I'm hearing a little mumbling, what we're talking about the committee there?
Well, if you look at line 14, the chief judge of the Superior Court of each county shall establish a student attendance protocol, and we're going to change that in school climate committee. So it is the Superior Court of each county does this. This is already a mandate. And all we're doing is adding that school climate is something they will look at in addition to attendance.
Very good, all right. Any questions from the committee? Number 12. Your button. Oh. Well, there. Is it 12?
Yes, it is.
All right, hold on.
I can talk loud.
No?
The mic might not be.
The mic, pull your mic up. You're using it. All right, try it.
It's still not working.
Press the back.
The what?
There's a button in the back.
There's a button by your mic. Mash the button. There you go.
Try it now.
There you go.
There we go. Thank you. I just wanted to ask, is this in the budgets for this extra committee in the school budgets?
There's no.
There's no budgetary,
There's no
need?
budgetary issue for this.
Okay.
This is a local.
Yes, but I
issue.
understand that, in the
Yeah.
local school budgets, so there's no budgetary issue for the local schools either.
As
To have
far
this
as nobody has brought that up to me, so I'm assuming that there's no budgetary issue with this.
I just want, okay, thank you, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Anything else? All right. Number 25.
Thank you, Mr.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is probably just wordsmithing. School climate, I guess, how would you define school climate? And I guess lines maybe 80 through 92 kind of explains some of that. I didn't know if there was a better way that we could, at first blush when I saw school climate, I thought it had something to do with the temperature of the school. Is there a better way to, I didn't know if you had gone through any other iterations of.
You know, school climate, I
standard?
think, may be defined in other areas, but essentially, school climate is what's going on in the school, in addition to the attendance. You know, what are the discipline issues? How many kids are being suspended? You know, all of those issues fall into the idea of school climate. Might ask Betsy, is there a definition somewhere of school climate?
No, there's not, but it's, school climate is referenced in two other statutes in the code. One of them is where they, rate the schools on the school climate rating, that kind of thing. And so we picked up the same terminology, so even though it's not defined, we tried to track the same language in those other two
Okay.
code sections in lines 80 through 92.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. All right. Number 20.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Nix, this may be, it's me. This may be it is completely outside the scope of what you're presenting here, but do you have any recollection of why, when we did this original code, we asked the chief judge to be responsible for making this committee?
I do not. This was brought to my attention through the local juvenile court judge, who I think sits on that is part of that protocol, but I do not know why.
We don't know the reason.
I'm going to ask our legislative counsel. Betsy, do you have any idea? Can you remember that? I remember when we dealt with that.
Yeah, I don't. It originally was enacted in 2004, so I don't know the
And if I remember correctly, it was because that they would be meeting with, working with the schools, trying to help with the overall discipline and overall operation and the suspensions and all with the schools, yeah.
I would assume that's true.
Yeah. And, okay. Any other, all right, number 29.
Regarding school climate, I don't know about in the code, but school people would know because they use that term regularly. Parents know.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think another aspect of that, Representative, would be how happy the teachers are in the school, how happy the parents are with the school. So it just looks at the whole aspect of when you walk in the school, does it feel like a good, happy school with a positive school climate?
I think you're right, and that's why I don't know that you can fully define school climate. It's like, what was it, the judge says, I can't define pornography, but I know it when I see it. I think that in this case, the school climate, you understand what they're talking about, and it takes in a lot of other issues as well.
Chairman, if I could, Gary, if you, from the State Department, I know in the rating and ranking of schools, I'd like for you to come to the podium if you would. They do use, that is part of the grade and rank of the schools. Can you comment on that, school climate?
Yes, sir. Each school in Georgia by statute has to have a school climate rating. The Department of Education, with a lot of stakeholders, put together a school climate rating system that includes attendance, discipline data, surveys of students and parents and teachers, and other measures that come up with a climate rating of a 1 to 5, 5 being a very positive, 1 being a negative. And we have very compelling data that shows there's a correlation between the climate rating and student academic outcomes, as much as a 25-point difference in the CCRPI.
All right, Gary, if you'd stay there, Representative Casas.
I'm going to go back to
hold it. Well, you through?
I'm done.
Okay, yes.
I'm going to go back to my earlier question. Do you have any idea why the Chief Justice of the Superior Court is responsible for this committee?
Well, I was in a school system when that bill originally passed, and it was my understanding, and we were told that the Superior Court judge has the convening power to bring all, if you see the list on page 2 of the bill, all the people that are brought to that student attendance protocol, it was explained to us that the Superior Court judge has the most convening power to bring all those entities together. And having served on a student attendance protocol committee myself, that was true in the county where I worked in, where the Superior Court judge convened everyone. And it turned out to be a very productive protocol committee.
Because you're involved in the law enforcement, you're involved in the school people and the total community, if I'm not mistaken. Is that
Yes,
correct?
sir. That's correct.
Did that answer your question? I hope that's clearing it up. Are any other questions? While he's up here, yeah. All right, Chairman, is no other questions? If you could say that we have one speaker on this topic, Allison, and I hope I get this right, Solon, is that correct? Yes, sir. And Allison, tell us who you're with and where you're from.
Great, thank you very much.
And if you would, pull that mic right to you.
Right
Yeah.
to me. I'm Allison Rutland Solon from Georgia Appleseed Center for Law and Justice, and we strongly support this bill. I said that the Justice Key said it was a small change. It's a small but inspired change because school attendance and school climate go hand in hand. And the data from schools that have increased their positive school climate have increased their graduation rates. Their high school graduation rates increase their academic performance. And so it's a win-win situation with a very small change.
Any questions for Allison? Any questions? Okay, thank you so much. All right, I see no other lights on, so do I have a motion? I have a so moved. Do I have a second? I have several seconds. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. All opposed, like sign. All right, Representative Nix, it passes. So now if you would, please, if you look in your folders, we now have the next House Bill 740. That was heard in subcommittee yesterday, so we will go ahead and take that one up.
Okay.
740.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We heard House Bill 740 yesterday, and let me give you just a little bit of background. Representative Howard, and I don't believe he's here, Wayne Howard, a number of times had brought bills that would have stated that a mandate that you cannot suspend a child from K through third grade. No extenuating circumstance. You just cannot do it. It might be interesting for you to know that there are over 2,600 children in that age range that get suspended in Georgia every year, which to me seems very, very high. So I think Chairman Coleman asked me actually to work with Representative Howard to see if we could find a way to do that. And my idea was we will not suspend them until we have at least looked at the underlying causes of why they may be acting up. The first legislation that we proposed ran into some problems because we proposed that before they could be suspended, they must have their speech, hearing, and sight screened and checked. We got a lot of pushback on the speech language part of it, that would have created a significant burden for those professionals, and that they have a lot of open positions. It's very difficult to fill those positions. So we met with a lot of different people and got a lot of different input, and I think we came up with a better bill than we had before, and I want to thank those people who helped to do that. So now what this bill is calling for is essentially for the students, when they have been identified as the discipline problem, that they would be entered into what is termed the response to intervention or the RTI framework to address these type of issues and to be able to determine, through that program they'll get the screenings to determine if they have those difficulties with sight, vision, and speech. The other part there is that the team that comes together as part of the response to intervention includes all of the people that we wanted in the first place, including the speech language pathologist, and they said that they would have no problem at all. So after kind of a rocky start with that, I would like to say that we've got just about everybody on board. Gail has been on board, has endorsed this legislation, Georgia Association of Educational Leaders. The speech language pathologist, after we changed that and did it through RTI, has come on board with us. The juvenile court judges, we had a long discussion with Cobb County, got some great input from them. They are in support of this. DeKalb, Gears, Voices for Georgia Children, Georgia Appleseed, the Georgia Partnership for Excellence in Education, the Georgia Association of School Nurses, and Dr. Eric Lukowski, who is the Associate Dean of the Medical College and is a child and adolescent psychologist. So we believe that we've got everybody on board. We believe that we've got a bill here that is even better than the original one, so that we can address this idea of having to suspend these children at that age. They need to be in school rather than to be suspended. So with that, I will stop. The current bill is LC 337280S. That's the one that we voted on and passed yesterday.
All right, anyone have any questions now? Any questions to Representative Nix? Any questions? All right, number 25.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You just wait till you get a bill.
I know, seriously. I'm just curious, the background pre-K through third, was there any discussion of going up higher, pre-K to fifth, or I guess explain to me kind of the cutoff there?
There was some discussion on it. I think this was focused on the fact that we're so hard trying to get children to be able to read by third grade. And if they're out a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever, it is huge. So that's my idea as to why we came up with a K through 3.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Any other questions? All right, number 11.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was trying to listen and read at the same time. I thought when you were introducing this bill, you were saying that it was not allowed to out-of-school suspend students up to the third grade at all. Is that not currently the law?
No, you should have been listening when you were reading.
I'm sorry. So what?
No, the original bill that Representative Howard had brought a number of times would have said that there was no ifs, ands, or buts. You just cannot do it.
Okay.
I was not comfortable with saying you can't. There's some children that even though they can see and hear and speak,
Right.
are gonna have to be suspended. So this just gives a safety valve to be able to look and see what the underlying cause is. Is there a problem that they have, a physical problem that may be able to be remedied that is causing that behavior?
Okay, so with that, I'm looking at paragraph B here. I'm wondering, one, why we need the words consecutive or cumulative days, because doesn't that just mean you cannot expel for more than 5 days? Consecutive or cumulative just means everything. You can't expel for more than 5 days in a school year? Is that right?
Well, you could expel for 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 days. You could
Right,
have.
but once somebody has already been suspended for 4 days, you can't suspend them for another 2. You can only suspend them for another 1, right?
That's correct.
So do we need those words consecutive or cumulative there? So
Well,
you
it-
could not suspend for more, for 5 or, you cannot suspend for 5, for more than 4 days, really. You cannot suspend for 5 or more cumulative days, means you cannot suspend for more than 4 days, is that right?
Betsy, can you comment on that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could, you're suggesting taking out consecutive or, so it's just cumulative, which.
Well, actually now, if you cannot suspend for 5 or more, you cannot suspend for 5, so you cannot suspend for more than 4. Is that right?
That's right.
So I think that would be more clear, and you don't need consecutive or cumulative. You're just saying for these students, K through 3, you could suspend them for 4 days in a school year.
I agree with what you're saying. I think if you take that out though,
Right.
whether it's 4 or 5, say for 5 days, somebody's gonna say, is that cumulative or consecutive? I mean, that's gonna be the question.
So then you
that
could
would
say-
fend off any sort of questions along that, but I totally agree with your point.
Then maybe I would, for more than 4 cumulative days.
I mean, I agree. I think that has the same meaning, so however, whatever the purpose is to.
You're permitted, if you want, if you think it needs to be changed, you're allowed to offer an amendment at the proper time.
Okay.
It's something, we will not debate that now, but, and then the committee can decide. So you're allowed, all right, number 27.
That was me. I was just gonna address the concern that was just mentioned. I think
Okay.
that what you were thinking was in aggregate. That's what the cumulative means, and I think that
You could-
that's
If little Johnny behaves on Monday.
right.
And
so
you kick him out for 1 day, you can do that.
Right.
And he comes back. If the next week he misbehaves on Monday, you can kick him out for 1 day, and he
Right.
comes back. Now he's got 2 days.
right.
And so on and so forth until you get past, once he's got 4 days, then before you can kick him out again, you've got to make sure he's in the RTI program.
That's correct. So the cumulative refers us to in aggregate. So that's why
They-
it works
we're
out the
getting-
way you say.
We're getting into lawyer
Yeah, we
language
get,
here, so.
Betsy, can you, Betsy, you and Representative Besky, what?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, cumulative or aggregate, I mean, yeah.
They're synonymous.
Yeah.
Well, matter of terminology right now is what we're talking about, how we want to say it.
We
And
might want to check with DOE and see if they have any reason for that, if that's.
Gary, do you have any reason for that? Let him come up here. Chair's discretion.
You will see consecutive or cumulative in many.
Pull the mic up to you, Ryan.
That terminology is in the bill and several other documents, just to allay the question that inevitably will come up that Betsy talked about. That's why that terminology was probably put in the bill, is because it's in several other places.
Does that, Representative Beskin, does that help you out?
It does.
All right, does Representative Lopez, does that help you out?
Yes.
Got my 2 attorneys here to help me out. Okay. All right. Any other questions now? Any other questions? This is the first hearing. Now, this bill, this is, there's no discussion of the ordinance. This is the second hearing, so this is only committee. Be no one from the audience presenting. Committee, you can ask any questions you want. This is it. So anything y'all want, any amendments, anything you want to offer, you let us know, okay? Number 11.
I'd like to offer an amendment, Mr. Chairman.
All right, at the proper time, I'll let you.
Proper time.
All right, any other comments from any member of the committee? All right, if not, now would be I have, anybody, who wants to, how many want to offer amendment? Well, I have another question first, 29.
No, I was just ready to offer due pass.
Well, I've got an amendment, so we're going, all right, I've got that due pass, okay? I have a due pass. Do I have a second? I have a second. Now you're in order for amendment. So Representative Beskin, you may offer your amendment at this time. We have a due pass and a second. All right, we have this amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would suggest for an amendment on line 27, we delete the words "5 or,"
All right, line 27.
and after the word "more," insert "than 4." So it would say, no student in public preschool through third grade shall be expelled or suspended from school for more than 4 consecutive or cumulative days during a school year, continuing on there.
All right. Did you get that, Betsy?
Yes, there's,
All right, let her read it to see we got what we want. And Representative Betsy, see if this is what you're saying, okay, Betsy?
okay, yeah, so on line 27, it would read, for more than 4 consecutive or cumulative days. On line 34, as well as in the title on line 5, you want to make the same change, it's got the same verbiage.
Yes.
So it'll be 34 and 35.
Yeah, 34 and line 5.
And line 5, yeah. Does everyone on the committee see what she's offering? So one more time now, very carefully, because we're going to vote. Betsy, what will it say now?
Instead of saying 5 or more consecutive or cumulative days, it'll say more than 4 consecutive or cumulative days.
More than, okay. Everybody got it? And it's changed in 3 places, correct? Yes, sir.
Do you want 5 days or do you want 4?
No, if you would, let me put you, all right, go ahead.
You want 5 or 4? You want
What?
5 days, right, total?
Right, no, after the 4th day, after they've been suspended for, before they can go to the 5th day, they got to start the RTI process. So it's the 4th day, the next day's the trigger. It seems, yeah.
Once again, listen very carefully. They can be suspended for 4 days. After the 4th time they've been suspended, then this process takes effect. 4 days. And then after that, it's when the process takes effect before they can go any further. Yes, all right, put your button, put your lights on. Betsy, all right, so we got that. All right, what's your question, number 19?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do apologize for putting out.
No.
But the ultimate objective, whether we have intervention between 4 or 5 or intervention between 4 and 5, the ultimate goal is 5 days. That a child, if I'm understanding, a child cannot be suspended until they have violated the school rules, with exception to those things that are outlined, 5 times. But between 4 and 5, they would have had to have these intervention measures. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So the total number of days that we're looking at is 5 days. Yes. The total number of days we're looking at is 5 days. The only thing the only thing that we have is an intervention process between 4 and 5, but that does not negate the total number 5. Is that not true?
I'm asking the author.
Okay. We got Randy questioning his own bill now, but
I'm a simple man. Let me tell you how I understand it, okay? You get a child that has been suspended 1, 2, 3, 4 days. He does something else. Before you can suspend him again, okay, you've got to get him in the RTI program. If this doesn't work, if he's still a problem and it doesn't solve the problem, then you can do it. But before you can expend him past that 4th day, then you've got to do something.
Follow-up question, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
So, I'm a pretty simple man too, so I appreciate you bringing clarity to what you're saying. So at the end of the day, the trigger for that child would be that 5th day.
Yes.
Everybody clear?
Is that not true?
That's the way I understand it. Unless there's an attorney that can explain it to me in a better way, I don't know.
The trigger for intervention is the 4th day. The trigger for suspension is the 5th day.
All he's simply saying, once again, after the 4th suspension, do the intervene with whatever we have, and then after that, you can't, if he's still misbehaving, you can go on. But you
that is
cannot
my-
give him his 5th day till after you've done some intervention.
That is my understanding. Let's
Is that
ask
right,
Betsy
Betsy?
to give her interpretation.
All right, we're gonna bring Betsy up here again.
This law, we're trying to save kids from getting suspended. And we're getting down in the weeds now in terms of what we're trying to do. I'm worried about kids getting suspended. If we're gonna argue about 4 or 5 days, then we're not on the right page. We're trying to figure out how to save kids that are getting suspended out of school. So we can argue days all we want
Yeah.
to, but I'd like to know what legislative council says, and I will go with what she
Right.
says.
What do you say, Betsy?
Well, I think actually everybody is saying the same thing.
They are. They are. They're saying the same thing.
Everybody is correct, and, yeah, you suspend a kid for 4 days, and if you never need to suspend them for another day, this will come into play. But the second you want to try to suspend them for 5 or more, 6, 7, whatever, then this will come into play, and it's the trigger to.
Before you do that other.
Mr. Chairman, one more comment, please.
Does everybody understand? Okay, yes, sir, 19.
Okay. For clarity, I support the bill as it is. Okay? Whether we're talking 4 days, 5 days, or 29 days, the intent of the bill, I support.
Well, all right, that's, okay, now we have an amendment on the table. Once again, Betsy, where we, before everybody knows what you vote, we're voting on the amendment. And Betsy, what does the amendment say? Hear you. Listen carefully.
In 3 places on lines 5, 27, and 34, we're changing suspended from school for 5 or more consecutive or cumulative days to suspended from school for more than 4 consecutive or cumulative days.
Everybody understand? What is your question, number 22? Questions?
All I want to say, Mr. Chairman, is that we're adopting an amendment that changes nothing. Everybody needs to understand that. It's just saying the same thing in a different way. Changes nothing.
All right,
But it's an amendment.
Any other questions? All right, we're voting on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment, please indicate by raising your hand. In favor of the amendment. Count them for me. Got 8. Against the amendment, raise your hand. Keep your hands up. Don't just do me. Get them way up there where we can see them. Yep, thank you. You have 10. The amendment fails, all right? Now we're back to the original motion. Do pass, and I have a second. Any more questions on the bill? All right, if not, I will take a vote. All in favor of... Please indicate by saying aye. All opposed, like sign. It passes. Thank you. All right.
Thank you, sir. Sorry about getting upset there, but I think we got into some wordsmithing that was unnecessary.
I saw a side of you I haven't seen. I like it. I like it, Randy. All right, is Kevin Tanner in the room? Kevin Tanner. Oh, Lord. I'm with you now. Kevin, has his bill arrived? All right, while he's doing that, we're going to distribute. Someone have a phone, please contact. You're calling him. Please distribute this piece of legislation. This is critical.
Tell her to go to 406.
Yeah. All right, in the meantime, I have one more bill to be assigned. So if you will, please listen. One more bill. All right, Representative Constance.
House Bill 874, which was first read today, but it's going to be, it was assigned to education. We're going to be assigning it to the Innovation Subcommittee. You got something. Well, I need to take some pressure off of
No, it cannot be
Cantrell.
assigned to the chairman's committee.
Oh, we can't.
It cannot be assigned to the chairman's committee. It's over in whose bill is it?
It's Representative Teasley's.
It can't go to his committee.
Okay, very good. So Representative Cantrell, you have one more bill.
Now, you can go to his committee as vice chair. Yeah.
Very good.
All right. Okay. All right, good. Okay. All right, tell us what the bill is. I know. Hold it, we're going to hit it. Here's what the bill is, where you can hear. Sam, are you Sam here? Tell us what the bill, what's your number?
15.
What is it? 15. All right, tell us a little bit, Representative Teasley.
The bill that was just assigned to
That just
Representative
assigned
Cantrell's.
to that it is
it is requiring that in the event that, if they're regarding charter schools, in the event that an authorizer requires any kind of adverse action, whether dramatic changes to the charter school, or requires that they be shut down, that they must document parent input and have a system in place for having parent input on that.
Okay, parent input for a shutdown, okay? All right, that's assigned to Representative Cantrell. And we may let you swap one of Cantrell's so you'll have one. I want to get, I want to do that. All right, number 22, did I have a, that was
No.
fine. All right, now, is Representative Tanner here? Where, is he here? I thought I saw him walk in. Okay, good. We've only been waiting on you 45 minutes, so everybody's in good mood. No, not really. So we're waiting. All right, Representative Tanner, if y'all would listen, he has two pieces of legislation, and it's a House Bill 781 and also House Resolution 992. So listen carefully. Here we go. All right. They all have a copy. Do we have a copy of all of this? All right. We're going from substitute LC 337301S. Is that correct? Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I was going to ask if staff could get me I brought the substitute over, if they could get me a copy of it.
Here she go right there.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, if it's okay, I will start with the constitutional amendment first.
That is?
House Resolution 992.
All right, do we have the resolution, Courtney, yet? All right, we everybody have the resolution. All right, House resolution, okay?
All right, this House resolution is a proposed constitutional amendment. Now, let me give you just a little bit of background, which will go for both the resolution and enabling legislation. For quite a few years now, we've been having conversations around the idea of creating some flexibility for our local communities.
Let me ask, does everyone have the resolution? Some do not. Where are they? The resolutions. I don't have it, so that's why we're looking for the resolution. Where are be sure you have the resolutions. All right, you're looking at the resolution LC 337300S. LC 337300S. All right, we need some more resolutions up here. Kaylin, this place is first, up here. Get the resolutions up here. Audience can have it later. Be sure the committee has them. All right. Everybody have it now. Everybody happy? Okay. Everybody's got it. Okay, go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But in essence, for the last several years, we've been having a conversation around opening up some flexibility with our local education, special purpose local option sales tax. Currently, the only thing that can be done with that is capital projects, building buildings. One of the things, this really came to light during the downturn in the economy in a lot of our school systems, and especially out in rural Georgia where they were just not growing anymore. They had no need to build additional buildings. But what we saw was many of them were having to find ways to create projects and to build buildings and do things because that's the only way they could get access to C-SPLOSH money. So one of the things that they asked us and the School Board Association, I think Will's here today, but he was president last year. He also happens to be one of my school board members in my district, but he, along with others, came to me and said, we really would like to see you all give us some sense of flexibility with these funds at the local level that the citizens at the local level will ultimately get to vote for. So we've looked at that for quite a few years. I know Speaker Pro Tem Jones has worked on this issue for several years. Chairman Andy Welch has worked on this issue for several years. But we've always had some pushback originally from the superintendents and the School Board Association. And I think we have them in the position now where they're either neutral or they're supportive of this effort. And in essence, what the constitutional amendment would do would allow us to create enabling legislation that would allow for up to 50% of E-SPLOSH money to be used for maintenance and operations cost. We're calling that educational programs and maintenance. This would be a decision by the local school board. Nothing that we're doing here would force a local system to do anything. The local board would make that determination if this was in their best interest, both financially and from a political perspective, and they would ask the voters of the county who ultimately would have to approve the way this was going to be done. So what you have in front of you in LC 337-300S is just simply making a change in the Constitution to allow us to make that change in general law. So that is the constitutional amendment. If it's okay, Mr. Chairman, I think it'd be helpful if I could go on and talk about the enabling legislation that is being driven by the constitutional amendment.
You have that before you, that's 781, that's LC 33-7301S. LC 33-730, I guess that's 1S, yes, okay?
Yes. And let me say this, the bill looks a lot larger than it has to be, and the reason for that is Chairman Welch, who's also worked on this issue, and he was going to try to be here today, but I believe he had a conflict. But one of the things that he wanted to try to do was to mirror up local SPLOST law with eSPLOST law. SPLOST law is what the county commission can collect and they spend on various projects. It has much more detail in the law of how that process is done, and he felt like it would be important to mirror those two up so that they would have similar language in the law. So that's what Betsy from Legislative Council has done, and the majority of this legislation is accomplishing that. It's just bringing in the SPLOST language in current Georgia law to match up with what we're doing in eSPLOST. So there's not a great deal of substantive changes from that perspective. It's just simply mirroring those up. So what we are doing, though, is in the legislation is on line 79, we have some definitions here that we're laying out for you about maintenance and educational programs. And these are the items that we're going to allow a school board the option to consider as they're putting together their eSPLOST program. And again, this is a substantive change from what's currently allowed under eSPLOST. Again, maintenance and educational programs are defined. The first section there talks a lot about upkeep, restoration of facilities, parking lots, and that type of thing, which would be allowed under eSPLOST. And then also going to the next page, we start getting into things like fuel for school buses, which currently would not be allowed in the current eSPLOST law. We also get into things, what we attempted to do here was to create, and the reason we created a list, I know Chairman Coleman, and I don't think you'd mind me saying this, would rather not have a list at all and just allow complete flexibility to the local board. But there's an attempt to balance this out so that we were allowing them to fund certain programs that were not math or science or history classes that every school has to do by state standards and that we pay for as a state through QBE funding. These would be programs that I always say they make a good school great. Being able to offer foreign language in middle school and elementary school, we don't offer reimbursement for that, but many of our school systems are doing it if they can afford it. Driver's ed programs, being able to have telemedicine programs in our schools, mental health services, school nurses, fine arts programs that many times are the first things to get cut during a budget crunch. Our STEM programs that we're talking a lot about now at the state that we're pushing and trying to encourage our schools to do, technology, computers, textbooks, all of those things that we hear parents complaining that my child doesn't have the technology at home they need, and we'd like for our schools to furnish iPads, et cetera. All those things would be allowed under this legislation. This list came from conversations with school superintendents. Gary McGibney, who may be here today, but many of you know him if you've been on this committee for a while, he has been in education for a long time, and he had helped me reach out to some superintendents across the state to say what are some of the programs that you would like to see this flexibility to help fund. And working with him and superintendents and school board members, we developed this list that was attempting to be as encompassing as we could. One of the things, too, I will point out to you specifically is we had under lines 110, letter P, underperforming school interventions and supports. We know this committee worked very hard last year with HB 338, along with the Senate and the governor's office on some school reform. That's going very well now with our chief turnaround officer. He's been well received in these schools. But this also would help with paying for programs that the local school may have found that they could use in underperforming schools. Also, lines 118, I'll point out wraparound services. We talked a lot about that last year, the need for those in these communities. Again, they could use that for the same purpose. All of these things, though, Mr. Chairman, I'll just remind the committee, are all, we're driving that decision to the local school board. It's not something we're dictating they have to do this, but it'll be at the decision of the local board. And the local board, from talking to local board, school board members, one of the things they tell me is there's going to be some years that we need to use all of our money to build buildings. There's going to be some years we can use some of this money to offset our operating costs. So I feel confident in our local school boards being able to make that decision at the local level. We have good board members who are elected at the local level to be in control of those local dollars, and all these funds are generated at that local community level. So, and then we go into a lot of wording again that's being brought over from our SPLOSH language today that's already currently in the law, making sure all of that's matching up, and along with how the question should be worded, et cetera. Again, that's currently not spelled out in our eSPLOSH language, but is spelled out in SPLOSH. So I won't go through all of that line by line, but when time comes, I will be happy to answer any questions that anybody has. And if I'm not able to answer the legal side of the question, I know Betsy will be able to help us, Mr. Chairman. This also allows, if someone's currently collecting this money and they've only been collecting for a certain period of time, then they're going to be able to go out and ask the voters if they're interested in making that change to include some O&M. And again, Mr. Chairman, I'm glad to answer any questions. There's a lot of terminology that we're copying over from SPLOSH law. There is one issue that has been brought to my attention that I want to point out. I think Betsy knows the section of the bill, and I'll explain that real quick for you, Mr. Chairman, so the committee will understand it. One of the things that is different between eSPLOSH and SPLOSH law today is if we're doing a SPLOSH project, and I spent many years as a county manager, we did SPLOSH, we bonded projects using SPLOSH dollars, but when we did a bond on SPLOSH, we would go out and ask the voters, can we take on debt based on this SPLOSH to pay it back within that time period of the SPLOSH, 5 or 6 years? And the voters would say yes or no to that. But we had to do it within that time frame. In the education side, we have local systems, smaller systems primarily. They're not collecting enough within that 5-year window to be able to bond a new school, for instance, and pay it off. So on the question, typically what's occurring today is they're allowed to say, we want to build Brooks Coleman High School, and we want to be able to, it's going to cost X number of dollars, and we anticipate we're going to collect this much from this to go toward it, but that debt will go out for a total of 10 years, or whatever the case might be, which is longer than the life of the eSPLOSH. The voters have an opportunity to say yes or no to that. We have unintentionally in this legislation, by mirroring SPLOSH language, we've cut that process out so they can no longer do that. The bond folks, the underwriters, the attorneys that do that are concerned about that. That's definitely not our intention. We want the process to continue like it has been, except for the increased flexibility. So at the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman, I would just like to ask Betsy if she could point us to that specific line and tell us what we might need to do to correct that. And I would like for the committee to consider that prior to moving the legislation forward.
All right. Very good. One thing I want to point out also with this bill, there had been talk earlier, Bubba Epps presented to this committee, had a E-LOST. I think 10, we figured out 10 systems had the E-LOST, but that would require an additional penny. The appetite was not here, and is not there to allow another penny sales tax. So we felt like that was not a good idea to go to at that time. Bubba did, Representative Epps. So he is endorsing this. He is giving his support to this one because it accomplishes what he was looking at, also allowing amounts of money to be used for the M&O, maintenance and operation. Another thing I want to assure you and to assure the superintendents, there is no intent to decrease the amount of funding for QBE. That's a question I've heard by a couple of superintendents today. No, we are not, and I have our chair of that committee, we're not decreasing QBE funding to the schools with this. Also, there is no rollback in here, rollback of property taxes or anything required in here. That's still up to the local board. So this is continue just there's more money that they can use. Is that correct?
That's correct, and there's actually language that specifies specifically that that this cannot affect QBE funding. So that is being protected. That's one of the concerns we heard in talking with superintendents, where they wanted to make sure that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
I know there's been a lot of folks that would like to tie this to a rollback, but again, that defeats the idea of the local flexibility they have here with this legislation. So again, you are correct, Mr. Chairman.
I want to be sure that's all right. I think probably before we take the questions, I'll just have Betsy to clarify where that is, and I have the board's lighting up, so that's good. But Betsy, if you'll clarify that, then we'll decide at the appropriate time what we need to do with that. Are you ready? Or you want to wait?
No, I'm actually trying to get confirmation from my
All right, so I'll go ahead and take questions. Very good. All right, 14.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question about citizens wanting to. I know that the school districts have to post where they're going to use the East Blast money for. Is there anything, any provision in the bill as far as it being continually posted on the website, just in case citizens want to go back to make sure that the local school district is using the money as what the voters actually voted on?
Well, one of the requirements in law is that the funds have to be accounted for separately, saying they have to be shown outside the general fund dollars and from an accounting practice perspective. So those are audited on an annual basis. That is a public document. So I don't believe there's a requirement that it be posted on a website per se, but there is a requirement that the funds are tracked separately. The funds under law have to be used for the purpose that the citizens vote on. When they vote on this, for instance, there'll be a question, do you want to use a portion of these fees for operations and maintenance or educational programs and maintenance? And if it passes, it has to be used for those buckets. And it will be audited on an annual basis. And if there's a problem in that, then the auditors will have a finding in their audit report that will be reported at a public board meeting when they present their audit findings. And again, that becomes a public document. So there are safeguards built in to ensure that the money's being used the way it's intended to be used for.
May I do a follow-up?
Yes, you may.
Okay. I guess one of the questions I have is the average citizen, when it comes down to the East Blast, if they had a question about how, like I said, how that money is spent, they really don't know what are the procedures about going by to challenge what the local school board has actually spent that money for. And I've heard of an instance where the citizens had voted for a certain thing to be paid for, and the school board changed it and allocated the money to building something else that was not specific for it. And even when the open records request was done to the school board, and it kind of noted back that was done, but it was still no regrets unless you have a citizen that's very fluent or knowledgeable about the law. So the average citizen wouldn't know what to do. And I was just wondering, was there any, I don't know if it's a time to make an amendment or not to it, somewhere putting it in there where informing the citizens if there's any questions or something about how East Blast money, since we're really opening the avenue up, what can be done for you as a citizen?
Well, again, there is, all of this is subject to open records, so any citizen could get access to that information. The audit report is published, and it is open records, and any findings that are found to be, where they're found to be deficient in those areas, becomes part of the public record. A specific requirement that it be posted on the website, I don't think there is one currently in the law. I would I would ask that, and there may be, and there's gonna be some folks here from the school systems that can testify how they currently are having to do that. But again, I think that may be a little outside the scope of what I'm trying to change, which is just increasing flexibility. But I believe there are some safeguards in place, and again, some of the folks who are in the school systems today can probably speak to that at the appropriate time.
Let Representative Belton make a comment on that, because we just passed a law to take care of that, I think.
Well, that's a very good question, Representative Stovall. We just passed that transparency law last year that will do exactly that, put it on the website, and they have to put it, state what they spend the money on. And ELOS was one of the buckets we talked about. So that's a great question.
Okay. Number 15.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, and Chairman Tanner. I've got two questions here. One is on line 67. It references how the election will be conducted, and it references the section of code. I apologize for not knowing that section of code offhand. Do you know what that speaks to? How an election must be held? For instance, obviously, I would think we would want to maximize the number of participants in that, and I don't know where we are in terms of maximizing voter participation.
Yeah, well, I may have to defer to Betsy, but let me answer part of that. We struck it in line 67, but we went in and added that back in 79 and 80. So we're not changing the law around that area, but again, that particular code section that we're referencing, I would ask our counsel if she could to be able to point us to that in the law.
Are you looking
line
at
80.
substitute, yeah.
Line 80.
Line 8, yeah.
It's 20-2-2062.
No, okay. So I'm operating off of LC 337227. Okay. So what LC should I be working off of? Okay.
LC 33. You're talking about the Constitution Amendment, right?
No, I'm talking about the bill right now.
The bill, okay, we're operating off LC 33 730I or 1S.
01.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Everybody have that? Yeah.
That's the one I have now.
It's line 68 and on line 80 is the code section you're referring to, I believe.
Okay, I'll try to find on this new substitute where I'm talking about. Basically, the answer to the question I'm just trying to find is when are we going to hold that election? I would want it to be at a time that maximizes voter participation, because it's obviously going to have an effect on all the voters in that district.
And that's the code section I quoted, 20-2-2062. Is that?
No, okay, maybe this is what it is on line 167. Shall conduct the election on a date and the manner authorized under code section 21-2.
Okay.
-540. I'm assuming that specifies when they're actually taking a vote on that.
That's correct.
So I'd love to get an answer to that question from Betsy, if you know it offhand, or if I'm willing to wait until later.
Yeah, actually, I can get you a specific. That's the general code section that has the 4 annual dates for elections. So this mirrors the SPLOST language. So but I can find the specific dates if you want.
Right, I'd like to find that out, and part of the reason I'm asking that is, I've been troubled at times when students have come home from school and the election is held on a date when perhaps the general public might not be aware of it, and they've been sent home with notes of, make sure you tell your parents to vote one way or another on this. And I would want, since the SPLOST is going to affect every taxpayer in that area, I want to make sure that they're involved in that decision as well. So that's.
Yeah, and I think if there's a school system who has sent a note home with a child, that'd be a violation of the law.
Okay, and that could have been a practice that used to happen and no longer does. I do specifically remember it back in the early 2000s.
I would say they can't do that now. PTAs now do on their website. They'll send information out, but you can't do that.
Okay.
The government cannot provide.
Cannot provide.
That's appropriate.
Yes, Betsy.
Yeah. Okay. So that code section basically says that it's the code section is for conducting special elections. So if we're posing a vote a question rather to the voters, it's an odd number of years. Sorry, it's the third Tuesday in March or the Tuesday after the first Monday in November. An even number of years, it's in conjunction with the presidential preference primary or the day of the general primary or the Tuesday after the first Monday in November. I mean, there's a, it's very, the elections laws are fairly complicated, but anyway, it's very prescriptive as to when they can do it.
Okay.
And I don't have the line number here, but I think I saw that it could be for periods of 3 or 5 years, or is it 3 to 5 years? I saw it and I don't remember.
It's, yeah, they can only do it up to 5, so they
can do it less than, but up to 5.
Okay, but so they could do it for 4 years?
yes.
Okay, so.
Pardon?
So the reason I asked that question is, again, my desire is in maximizing voter participation.
Right.
Yeah.
And theoretically, you could put it on an odd-numbered year, which has less voter participation, and then do it every 4 years, where, again, there's less voter participation. So I've got concerns there. As a general concept, I do have some pause in allowing for the use of this money being spent on maintenance expenses, particularly under the request of flexibility. So I recognize this next concept has not been universally popular, but a few years ago we considered some flexibility as it related to a fractional SPLOST, and some areas wanted that flexibility and others said that we shouldn't have that flexibility. And so I'm concerned. So I would be much more open to this concept if we allowed other counties to have the flexibility on a fractional side. And so this contemplates a fractional concept because we're allowing them to spend only 50% of money collected during the SPLOST on maintenance expenses. But for instance, a county like where I come from, we would like the flexibility of a fractional SPLOST because sometimes we can't justify 1%, and then we fill the SPLOST with things we frankly don't need. And so I'm concerned about allowing flexibility here in a way that we don't allow other flexibility. And so could you speak to that concern? Can you address why should we allow for this kind of flexibility, which has the potential to really grow what a county is spending, when perhaps they should just say, we can't justify an additional 1% SPLOST, so we're going to give our taxpayers a break for the next 4 years. So can you help me understand why we should move in that direction?
Well, I think there's two different policy questions there. I don't personally have any issue with the flexibility and the fractional side. It's a different concept than what I'm talking about.
It is.
I think the more with local dollars, I think the more flexibility we can give to the local systems, the better. We spend a lot of state dollars on education, and we have a lot of requirements that go with those state dollars, and I think that's appropriate because they are state dollars. Here, these are dollars that are collected at the local level that the local citizens have to decide for themselves. Is this something that we want? Is it an appropriate way to spend our money? And we've elected these local representatives here on our Board of Education to make those decisions for us. So I think it's appropriate to give them as much flexibility from that perspective as we can. When it comes to state dollars, I feel differently. But so I don't have a policy disagreement with what you're talking about offering the ability for fractional SPLOST or eSPLOST. But I think it's a different policy discussion.
Okay.
Okay. Next, 24.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate you taking this up. Actually, as a school board member back in 2011, I actually came and spoke in favor of this exact same idea with Chairman Welch was trying to do it. And it's amazing as this local school board, you often have a situation where you have too much money in one bucket and not enough money to pay for your teachers or whatever it is. And so I think this is very, very good. I have two very quick questions. One is, this is not going to be used for salary. Is that correct?
Well, the only in lines, let's see. It talks about counseling. It talks about school nurses and supplies. So in those cases, I would anticipate a school could pay for a school nurse through this flexibility. They could pay for counseling, including career graduation, supplemental counseling. So in those cases, they could pay for a salary.
But the vast majority of the salaries are teacher salaries, and it's not going to be used for
That's
that.
correct. This would be, again, for things that schools are not necessarily required to have under the law, under what we require from the state board. Those would be these auxiliary services, the things that get cut, the things that you hear your family connections and other people out trying to raise money to pay for the school. Those are the types of programs that we're talking about, but not your core curriculum classes.
Because most times school boards absolutely need eSPLOS, but they don't need all of it. But they have to do something with it. They end up, building a high school gym when they're furloughing teachers, and it's stupid. But that's the laws that say. So I really like this idea. The second very quick question is, when goes to the voters, will the voters have to be told that some of this will be used for maintenance or whatever these different things?
Yes. The voters will. It'll be full disclosure. The voters will have to approve it with that understanding. So ultimately, again, I've said this in this conversation from the beginning. I have confidence ultimately in the local voters to control their own destiny, and they get to make that decision.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Representative Hilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to put my banker hat on for a minute here. What we tend to look at is sources and uses. So with all of our clients, we try to match the sources of funds, long-term capital with long-term needs, short-term capital with short-term needs. And that's primarily where my heartburn lies in this, is we have a mismatch of short-term capital, long-term ongoing maintenance needs. And I feel we may be putting the proverbial gun to the voter's head every 4 years when we say, if the SPLOS doesn't pass, we won't have fuel for buses, we won't have classroom supplies, we won't have counselors. Can you help me kind of reconcile that concern?
Well, I think that's a valid issue, and I think that each individual system has to answer that. And if we move this forward, ultimately, that's a decision for each board and each community to make. So, again, I guess because I've wrestled with that as a board member of a bank and someone who looks at those same things, where I have settled at on this issue is the confidence I place in the local board members and the local citizens to make those decisions and to elect quality members. It's one of the reasons we did limit it to the list. Chairman Coleman and I have had a lot of discussions about why the list. We've also limited it to 50%, so they could not become so dependent on those funds. But much like Mr. Belton said, when you've got a situation where we need to build this building, we need to do this, but now we're left over with this 25% that we're going to come up with a project to build that we really don't necessarily have to have, they can plug in these auxiliary
I could be wrong, though. But we have property taxes to fund the maintenance, to provide for maintenance.
Yeah, and a lot of our systems are bumping up against the 20 mills, which is the cap. And let me say this from personal experience. My local community, if they had had this flexibility during the downturn, we would have not had a property tax increase. And I know one of our board members is here, and I'm sure he'll be happy to discuss that. But because they don't have the flexibility, we were still building buildings, but we were not being able to pay teachers. And be able to provide fuel for buses and other things that we were having because we had to have a property tax increase. So again, just like running a business in a bank, you have flexibility within your operating budget. When one item's hurting, you may be able to move it to the other. And we have a lot of more flexibility in the county level with our funding, and the schools have very limited funding sources. Property tax is primarily the funding source. The only other one they typically have is eSPLOS if the voters have given that opportunity to them, but they have no flexibility.
Okay, thank you.
All right, that's the question. All right, next we have, I think it's Representative Lopez.
Yes, thank you. I also have just a couple of concerns. To start off, what was mentioned, right, that there's no intention necessarily to reduce basically what is our state responsibility to fund education, and QBE isn't funded even adequately to the levels it's supposed to be. But come another recession, and economies are cyclical, bound to happen, this seems like we fall back relying on a tax one way or another. This is basically an ability to raise taxes, either through East Plus or through raising property taxes, or as you mentioned, if you're already at the cap, like in DeKalb, then this is your other way that you raise taxes when you can no longer raise them through your property taxes. So I just,
Well,
that's what this seems to me, to give the flexibility. And East Plus was specifically intended to be capital investments. And I understand that we have concerns on other things that need to be paid in these schools, and there's very important things. But that was exactly the intended purpose of East Plus, for capital investment. And if money's not needed for that, then we don't need to raise taxes if we don't need to capital investment.
Well, that's a valid policy argument. I mean, that you are correct. The purpose of East Splosh, when it was originally passed, probably in the 80s, was for capital projects. But you know, part of what we do here in the General Assembly every year we're here is we look at, as policy evolves, and we make decisions whether or not that policy needs to be updated or that policy needs to be changed. And one of the things I try to do is I listen to the folks I represent, my constituents, my school board members, and the people in my district to listen to what their issues are and their concerns. And I watch trends, and I look at the downturn, and you know, as someone who was managing local government, and I see how what a difference that flexibility could have made. And again, I have a great deal of confidence, and maybe I just come from a place where I can have that level of confidence in my local elected leaders, and maybe all of you are not able to, but I can, that they'll make good, sound business decisions on how to spend those dollars. But again, I'm very open to ideas about further limiting how this can be used. If you feel like there's items on this list that shouldn't be there, or there's ways to limit it, that I'm open to that. This is a policy discussion on changing a policy for our state that I think could be very helpful to some of our schools. All of them won't take advantage of it. All of them are not in a position to take advantage of it. But I just personally feel that if it can benefit a portion of our school systems, that it's worth us offering that flexibility to them.
Right.
You know, Representative Lopez, when we the last 4 years we've traveled the state over. We've had probably 20, and Representative Stovall, you had some this year. We traveled over, and the number one request from superintendents and teachers was to give us another funding source. They were jealous of the 10 schools that had the ELOS. That was done back years ago when they were struggling like these, and that was passed where they could do the M&O, give us the same option. So, but that's another penny. So I would say that you get out of Metro Atlanta, you get out of the Gwinnett's, you get out of the DeKalb's. Of course, Gwinnett needs every dime they get to build, but they have many other needs more than the building. And a lot of the parents are complaining to me that they're building Taj Mahals, these $100 million high schools, when they could be better spending their money, you know, build more. So this is a result of what we heard from these hearings.
Yes, and that's correct, but
But we gave them flexibility and gave them the freedom. And now we're trying to tell them what, you know, give, and let them, they're elected just like you and I are elected, the board members. And they say let them deal with their public. So go ahead, you respond, yeah.
Yes, and that's correct. Again, these are things that need to be funded, but I don't know that we need to be funding them by allowing basically another way of raising taxes, particularly for communities outside of Metro Atlanta, where any amount in raise of East Plus that wouldn't otherwise be used for capital investment is a hardship to those areas.
But it's just another tool in the toolbox for schools that want to use it again if they're voted. And I've been shocked as we've traveled around, the parents that are saying we want this. And we're not talking about just the school boards, and we're talking about the superintendents. We've had parents come in, the same thing. Don't let them raise it. We've got school systems, they're charging 14 mills. They would be kicked out of office if they raised it to 15 mills. Gwinnett County, they're hitting 20 mills. Fulton, Calb, I think Atlanta's 25 mills. So that's what. So this is just another tool, but that's just to answer your question there. Yes, sir. Nick, you have another question?
No, that's
okay. Thank you so much. All right, number 22.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Tanner, I'm struggling a little bit because I know my folks back home do not support this bill, and it's confusing to me as to why they wouldn't. I assumed that they would. So, but what I heard Chairman Coleman say is that it might be kind of a divide between urban in rural, that because the metro counties need the money for capital outlay. So why would they oppose it if, because they can still use the money how they want? I'm just trying to figure it out. I don't get it.
I think part of that issue is the fact that they probably need all the funds for capital projects.
Right, but why would they not
and
afford the others the same flexibility?
I think because they know there'll be some pressure from the local constituency to say, look, we really don't need to build that building that nice or to do this.
Okay.
We could use some of these funds for this other operations and programs. It also, there's still a fear among some systems that this is going to be the state's going to say, look, we're giving you this extra money, so therefore we're not going to fully fund QBE. And that's why one of the things as we work through this, and over the years this has been introduced and talked about, that we kept coming back to that fear, and that's why we put in the legislation that this cannot go into factoring in state funding.
Okay, makes sense.
But I will say, when you get outside Metro Atlanta, many times you see different things occurring in your schools. Where I'm at, Dawson, Lumpkin, Gilmer, Fannin, all of those schools around North Georgia very much support and want this flexibility because this can make a huge difference. I have all my daughters are in school, and in the county that I'm in, we don't offer middle school foreign language. The county next door, they're starting a full immersion program of Spanish and English in kindergarten next year. Well, my constituents are saying, you know what, we'd like those same programs. They can't afford to collect the additional property tax, but this might give them enough extra flexibility to make that happen. And I just personally feel like that, my girls deserve the same level of education if there's a way to do it and give that flexibility as someone who lives in your community or in your community, quite honestly. So.
All right, number 15.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would this require, you mentioned that some number of areas are bumping up against the 20 mil cap. Would this require that they hit the 20 mil cap before they can implement this?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Very good question. 16.
Thank you, Kevin. Would this also allow them to be able to purchase new air conditioning units for buildings?
They can do that now.
And would this also allow them to be able to purchase maybe engines for the buses, motors for the buses, rather than have to buy new buses?
It, as far as the first question goes about et cetera, yes. In the first section there on lines 78 through 93, it talks about upkeep some existing facilities, routine reoccurring work to keep a facility up and running, et cetera. So there would be opportunities for them to do repairs. Engines for buses, I'm not sure that would fall under that, but I do, when it comes to the buildings, they would have that flexibility.
I understand now that through East Bloss, they can only buy new HVACs for new buildings. They can't do anything for their old buildings, so that puts them in a bind there, ties their hands. But also with the buses, I understand now they cannot buy motors for their old buses. Maybe the buses are still good. They just can't buy them because of their hands are tied. And I believe that this would be something that would allow them to use
If you'll
better
notice
judgment.
on D, it says fuel for buses. That's the largest cost they have. If they could free up the money they're spending for fuel for buses, that'd give them that money they could use for engines. So what this can do is can free up money they're having to spend for day-to-day costs that they can use that money for other things. So it really frees up a lot of money.
It does, Chairman.
Yes,
and also my school superintendent is for this.
Okay. Any other questions now? Any other questions? Because we have some people want to speak to this. Is it okay if I call them? Do you have anything you want to say before we?
Yes, the only thing I do want to add has nothing to do with this bill, but at 4 o'clock, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to leave.
And you going, I'm going to let you go.
And I'll tell you the reason I'm leaving is I have a father-daughter dance with my 10-year-old.
And you better go.
The only way I'm not going is somebody shoots me. So at 4 o'clock, I'm leaving, and it's nothing against the committee. So.
No, and if we don't have the vote, we'll just postpone and get the vote the next week.
All
But
right.
that's
Yes,
good.
sir.
So-
Thank you.
And I tell you, you go. That's all. That's what's more important. All right, we have Will Wade. Is it Will Wade from Dawson County Schools? Is he here? Will, okay? If you'll come to the.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Will Wade. I'm a Dawson County Board of Education member, having served since 2004. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Representative Tanner, and to all the other discussion and representatives here today. I just want to speak in favor of this and try to answer some of the concerns. I also am a community banker, and I look at sources and uses. And I want to remind the committee that we all had to make tough choices as elected officials at the state level and at the local level. Our district, Dawson County, had the second largest drop in property valuation. So we had to make tough choices. And there's nothing that says that in 10 years that we won't have another recession that will do the same thing. And things that may be a short-term or long-term need, we locally have to make real-time decisions. Having flexibility would have been a huge benefit to us. The other things that we're struggling with mostly are outside of even the state's influence. That's healthcare costs. Our budget in Dawson County, we have 7 less total employees in 2018 than we did in 2008. We're spending over $1.1 million annually in health insurance, just that one line item. Fuel costs, all of those things are areas in which we need flexibility to make those decisions. I do believe that this is not adding an additional tax. It's allowing the local community to decide, is this a tax worth imposing on ourselves? And all of us have that opportunity in our county commissions to do that, and the school system is not in a position to do that right now. This is a tax that there are certain systems that I've talked to in South Georgia that are not growing, but they are maintaining their size. They don't have an ELOST on the books right now. They would give consideration to putting an ELOST to their voters if they had the opportunity to offset, to be able to have 50% of their funds to add elementary school second languages. So I think this truly would be this would fit within the state's purview to allow individual communities to put it on their ballot to make these decisions. And it's just like anything else. If you guys don't do a good job in your constituents' eyes, they will put somebody up that they want to come and represent you in a different manner. We deal with it every 4 years in my community, and I don't think that there would be any question as to whether or not, local systems are misusing it. To the question earlier, the audits, I can tell you that we have at least 4 times a year, we have people come to us and ask us to review the audit from our ELOST as well as our state audit. We have a completely and totally transparent community. I don't know of any systems that have been in a position that they've ever had to try to hide that. I think they face those things, and the voters sometimes make changes at that local level, whether that be the board, the superintendent, a finance director, no different than any other agency across the state. It's a valid point, but I think we address it. Love to provide any feedback to any other questions if you have it, but I really think that this is the time, because we will have another recession. It's just a matter of when. I hope it's not as deep and as long as this last one. But I can tell you, if this legislation doesn't pass, I know what will happen in my community. We will see potentially a 20% reduction in our property taxes. We could max out our mill, still receive less revenue, and we would be in a position to have to furlough teachers and cut programs, whether this bill passes or not. So if it passes, it gives us a buffer. That would be our request. And I can tell you, this discussion that you've had today, we've had at the Georgia School Board Association since I've been involved. The communities are concerned, quite frankly, about QBE. And I would be an advocate for having the conversation that was mentioned today, that it's never been fully funded. The state's going to be receiving a lot more revenue, I understand, due to the new tax law. That may be something that this body needs to recommend. I understand if $167 million could be allocated, that would fully fund QBE under its current formula. I don't think there would be anybody opposed to that, not requesting a tax increase. Just remember, that was a promise that was given to the entire state, and it's not been funded for a long time. So that's a completely separate issue, but all of you have been dancing around that elephant in the room. But thank you very much. I hope that you guys will pass this bill, and I think that the communities that want this, their voters will support it, and the communities that don't, they will vote it down. That should be the voter's choice. Thank you.
Any questions, Station? Any questions for our speaker? Any questions? All right, thank you so much. All right, next, I'm having trouble with the name. I'll just say Public Education Matters. Where are we? And give us your name, yeah. Oh, I know who you, good Lord, I couldn't read or write. Now you write like I do. I write worse than that.
Right,
Yeah.
so I apologize for that.
That's all right.
So I just wanted to
Tell them who you are.
I'm Cecily Harshkanane with Public Education Matters, Georgia. And I simply wanted to stand up and say I absolutely applaud what Representative Tanner is what you're doing in this bill. And I do think that, as you said, for systems to better and best provide for what we think of as a complete education is a good thing. So I'm not questioning that at all. And I do think the flexibility piece of it is important. But I would like to say, and you've said this, and I think it's been said, and I think all of y'all feel this, but I don't think we can ever put too fine a point on it. And Representative Lopez, certainly with your comments, that even if we have in there, which I appreciate that it's in there, that this cannot supplant QBE funding, we don't want to take our eyes off of the need to fully fund and as was just said, fully fund education in the state of Georgia. So I know this is not doing that. It's not the intent. It's just to provide flexibility. I have total trust in the local systems and the local boards to do that well. It's not a question of any of that whatsoever. It's just that we don't want to take our eyes off of that, because as things go forward, and particularly now as we're going to have some surplus of revenues, we don't want to say, well, we're already taking care of some of these things now. We do want to provide this full complement of what we all know we really need to best educate children in the state of Georgia. That said, I do think, that in terms of this way of funding, there are some things that I think we all know, but we just need to remind ourselves that when SPLOST went out, when it was passed, it was going to be for capital projects for a reason. It's a regressive tax or regressive rate tax. That is it a sustainable funding mechanism for funding our schools. I'm not opposing it. I do think I've passed many SPLOST. I support them. I'm not saying that, but I do think that's a reminder that we need to have in there as we go forward to just that we really want. And I know y'all all feel this, and I know Representative Tanner feels this, that we need to make certain the state fully funds QBE and fully looks at what is needed to best fund. So, and then just one final point, well, two, but one that that I do worry about, that we already have discrepancies in terms of what the rural systems or low tax digest systems, their ability to pull in already, and that I do think a sales tax could exacerbate that. I understand there's needs there, and that what Representative Tanner was saying, that we're hoping this can use some needs, and then the last speaker, in terms of some systems that have not gone out for an eSPLOST yet, will be able to go out for it in terms of M&O. But I do think that's I think that's just something that we got to keep in mind. That is this going to, yes, I want all school systems and all schools in the state of Georgia to have any means possible to get in the funds they need, but we don't want to exacerbate what's already a difference of some ability to do that within our rural or low tax digest. So that all said, I did have one question that wasn't asked, and that's on the local Board of Education, shall be line 141, that is this adding an addition that state charter schools could be included now in the referendum? And anyway, that's just a question. I just see, regardless of what you think of that, I do see logistical as local boards do their SPLOST plan and do that 5-year plan. They're planning for a system, I just see logistical and points of tension there. So, all right, thank you all very, very much.
All right. Do I have any questions? I don't. So Representative Tanner, number 13, yes.
Will we get an answer to that question?
I'm going to ask that. Yeah, I'm going to ask that now. I'm going to ask Representative Tanner to come back up and answer that question, and then,
Mr. Chairman, and Betsy, you correct me if I'm wrong, but that's currently in law, correct? Or Betsy, tell us.
The current law shows up on page 3 on line 67 through 72. So local charter schools and state chartered special schools are already included under eSPLOST. But in the new language, it would add state charter schools
State charter, yeah.
Yes, that's the local charters are included currently.
All right. Representative Howard, did you have a question? Not a question, just a comment. All right, number 1, is that where you are? 13, okay, you're on.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for being late, coming out of another committee meeting. But I just want to make sure that I express what my local board has told me about this East Blos and using it for the fundings and not interfering with the QBE. They are fully in support of this, and they had asked us to I approached Representative Tanner about this when I learned that he was carrying the bill, but we were looking at carrying it, knowing it would be a heavy lift, but we do support this, and we need, because we have already kind of maxed out on building bricks and mortar, and maintaining those facilities that we have now is an issue that we continue to run into. So I just wanted to express that.
You remember in your area, when we had the hearing, that was one of the top priorities.
Yes.
Top priorities, your area. And 18.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chair. Representative Tanner, I guess I needed to understand, because we had a lot of discussion yesterday around state charters. So currently, a state charter does not participate or receive any local funds.
Well, and I'm going to be 100% honest with you about that, about the charter portion of this. Chairman Welch and we've been working on 2 separate bills. We've combined the bills into one. That was in his language, and he was going to be here today. He wasn't able to be. So just Betsy can tell us legally what that does, but that is something that he had as a priority that he put in his legislation. So we can tell you what it does, but as far as the policy behind that, I would defer that to him.
Okay, so I guess.
Yeah.
Comment
on that?
Sure. Yeah, it would be up to the discretion of a local board of education about whether they wanted to include them in the East Blos. It's not like the state charter school could go on their own and do one. So, and I have no idea, right now, because the law does allow state charter special schools, I have no idea if that's ever been utilized at East Blos if it had. But, so it's on line 141 where it would authorize the local board to include any of those types of charter schools if they wanted to.
So it would be up to the local board to make the determination whether they wanted to include them. My guess is that would rarely ever happen. But.
So, okay, I just want to make sure that I'm clear in my thoughts here. But current law allows for, we said the special charter schools and the local charter schools, and I'm assuming it's equivalent to a charter that a local school board authorized. So the current law allows that now.
For locals and the state charter special schools, which are under the State Board of Education.
Okay, so is the, and I'm asking because I really don't know. So is the purpose of the constitutional amendment is because we're adding the state charter schools, or will we need a constitutional amendment just to change the formula or the percentages?
Because of changing, opening it up to operations and maintenance, we have to have a constitutional amendment.
Thank you.
How it's been. All right, 15.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry for asking so many questions.
No, that's how we learn.
You mentioned at the onset of your testimony that this would not allow for any kind of property tax rollback.
It wouldn't require.
Wouldn't require.
It wouldn't require.
It allowed if they want to. They can do it if they want to. It just wouldn't require.
But that's certainly not one of the listed items here in terms of what. So under this measure, you probably picked up, my main concern comes from the taxpayer's perspective. And what I don't want to see is budgets grow when they don't necessarily need to grow. And one of the things that, if, again, getting back to that, again, I know it's a different policy, I totally agree with you, different policy discussion, but the advantage of the fractional SPLOS, particularly in larger areas, is it provides the accountability to tax at a lower rate if they want to. So offset and property tax would also provide some accountability for the members of the school board. Okay, we're going to engage in this maintenance. We're going to do 50% in capital projects, and we're going to do 35% in maintenance, but we can't justify spending the rest of that penny. So therefore, we want to offer as a tax rebate to our citizens a 15% property tax rollback. And where would that fall into this discussion?
They would have the ability under the law to do that. So if they had the policy discussion exactly like you said, and they got down and said, look, we're going to, because of this, we're going to be able to have a surplus of funds at the end of this budget cycle, and we're going to have X number of million left, whatever the case might be, which is amounts to 1/10 of a mil or 25%. They could roll back. There's nothing that would prohibit that from happening at all.
So when you say it wouldn't require a property tax rollback, why did you feel the need to make that distinction?
Because that's one of the big concerns that the local schools have had, that we would give them this ability, but then they would be forced to roll back, so they would not have the real flexibility. So that was the purpose of that.
Okay.
Well, I've had a lot of discussions with a lot of local schools and parents around this around this issue, so I wanted to try to make sure that I was able to cover the concerns I'm hearing from schools and superintendents and board members, and just make sure I made those points.
And if there's one thing I know about Representative Kevin Tanner, is he's a very thorough man, and so you do your homework on that, and I greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
One of the things I didn't mention, and I don't want to get out of here at some point without saying this, I have talked to the state school superintendent. He actually came and saw me about this issue, and I know Gary McGivney's here who works for him, but he told me that he 100% supported this effort and supported this legislation, and I think that's at least worth making that statement, that our state school superintendent would support giving our local communities this increased flexibility.
I agree. All right, the chair likes this, and been working on this as you have about 3 or 4 years. I'm in this posture. We can do several things. Of course, the session is really ticking fast. It still has a way to go, this bill would. It has to go through the full House. It'd have to go through the Senate, et cetera, et cetera. But we can take this posture today. I can delay this, and I'm trying to decide. I'm really agonizing over this. I can take a vote today. I think it would pass. I could delay it. We could have a vote next week. But I think I'm just going to, I know there's some questions about the items. I know some questions about a few things, but that will, I guarantee it will be taken care of by Kevin. I have no, Representative Tanner, I have no, but I think the chair is going to do this. I'm going to take a vote if I can get a motion. If I can get a motion, I'm going to take a vote, and then I will see. So 24, if this is for a motion. All right.
I'll make a motion to do pass.
I have a motion to do pass. Do I have a second? I have a second. Who is my second? Right here. All right, any discussion? 18, do you have a question? One question.
Oh, I don't have a one. I'd like to offer an amendment.
What is your amendment?
Strike state charter schools from line 142.
Strike state charter schools from line 143.
Where's 142?
What would that do to the bill, Betsy?
It just would take them out of being able to be included in an E-Splosh.
All right, so you heard what she said. We have a motion for an amendment. Strike state charter schools. Betsy says you would take them out for anything, and of course they are part of the public schools. So, all right, we have do I have a second to this amendment? Do I have a second? I have a second. Do I have any discussion? I have none. All in favor of striking it, please raise your hand if you're in favor. One, count them for me. 1, 2, 3.
I got 6.
6. All opposed, raise your hand. Nine. All right, it fails. All right. Now we're back to the original motion to do pass. Have a second. All in favor of do pass, please. By substitute. I have now a do pass by substitute. All in favor do indicate by saying aye. All opposed, like sign. All right. All in favor of do pass, please raise your hand. Do pass. See your hands.
I got 9.
All right, all opposed. 7. It does pass, all right. Pardon? Now we have the constitutional amendment. All right, do I have a motion on the constitutional amendment? I have a motion to pass. Do I have a second? All right, do I have any questions? All right, all in favor of the constitutional amendment, please indicate by raising your hand. All right, all opposed, like sign. It passes, all right? So it has passed. And I want to say this, Kevin, 'cause I know you need to leave. Please, if you have any questions, any comments, want to add anything to it, see Kevin and talk to him, and let's get your comments and your questions or concerns added to the bill. Remember, listen, we have meetings next week. 2, we have a bunch of legislation. Each subcommittee is instructed, listen to me, each subcommittee chair, you're instructed to hold your meeting and clear all your bills next week. And we'll have a meeting Thursday and take as many as we can. Understand? All right, is Representative Glanton here? All right, Representative Nix and Representative Bentley, your bill, nepotism, what's your status on that one? All right, let me know next week. Let's decide that one. And Representative Glanton, Senate Bill 30. Okay, thank you. Have a good weekend, people. Thank you so much.